with astaxanthin, you have an excellent safety profile, and you actually extended lifespan more than 10%, which is, again, the first agent to do a lifespan extension of more than 10% that's safe enough for everyday use and broadly accessible as a supplement.
Well, I'm excited to talk about one of my favorite nutrients, astaxanthin, which has been called by experts a longevity vitamin. So let's start high level. What is astaxanthin? Where is it found?
Yeah, so astaxanthin is a naturally occurring molecule in the marine environment, and it's actually what makes salmon pink. So a lot of people may not have heard of astaxanthin, but they definitely consumed it, whether they've eaten salmon or even lobster, crab, shrimp. So it's this naturally occurring pigment that gives all these species their beautiful coloration, but it actually does so much more than that. It actually gives them really important health and longevity benefits.
Super interesting. So it's fairly ubiquitous in the food supply. It's in salmon. It's red. It's that red pigment.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. Because we all know that salmon is a healthful food, and I think the health benefits of seafood like salmon are often attributed to the omega-3 fatty acids that they contain. But it's interesting that this super powerful antioxidant is so concentrated in salmon. Where do the salmon get it from?
Yeah, so it actually goes back billions of years, and so it started with coevolution with plants and photosynthesis, and so it helped the plants really deal with the environmental stresses, and in particular with microalgae, with the UV light from the sun that can be damaging. So these microalgae developed astaxanthin, carotenoids and astaxanthin to deal with it, and then it works its way up the food chain. So it's this amazing, invention of nature that benefits all these species. And with astaxanthin, it's amazing because it localizes in their flesh. It gives them the beautiful coloration, and then when they're swimming upstream, it allows them to endure and last as they swim to reproduce. And it's this amazing, strenuous journey, upstream, dealing with the bears, dealing with not eating and basically wasting away. And then their skin turns bright red as the astaxanthin is transferred from their flesh to their skin, kind of signaling their readiness to spawn. And then ultimately they reproduce and they transfer the astaxanthin to their eggs to help with the development of the eggs and protection against the sunlight in the shallow waters. So it's something that is conserved, through the lifespan of the salmon and really important to their reproduction.
Wow. Yeah, I don't think most people are aware of the fact that salmon are born gray.
Mm-hmm.
And farm salmon are often given astaxanthin in their feed, which gives them the color that we associate with salmon.
A lot of people think farm salmon are dyed pink, artificially dyed pink. And you'll see videos online about, hey, this has an artificial pigment. They're actually, like you said, fed astaxanthin. It's just part of their diet. And so there could be reasons why you would choose wild over farm-raised salmon for the living conditions and all those things. But in terms of why they're pink, it's still astaxanthin. And, wild-caught salmon may have more astaxanthin because if you're a salmon farmer, you're going to put just enough in to give it the beautiful color, but you don't necessarily need to keep loading it up with more and more. So it's really important. But beyond that, it also helps them just grow and have the strength and size and fight off infections. And so it's not just for the color, but it helps them be healthy as they're being raised.
Is the depth of the pigment that you can observe in when comparing different breeds of salmon a reflection of how much astaxanthin is in their flesh? Because I've noticed Atlantic salmon, for example, it's sort of like a pale pink, whereas sockeye salmon is incredibly deep in its pigmentation.
Oh yeah. So you can have several, variations in milligram quantity per serving across different types of salmon. So the redder the salmon, the more astaxanthin there is. So that's a great way to look at, if you're trying to pick which fillet, go with the reddest version. Yeah.
That's so cool. So microalgae create astaxanthin as a response to, and I've been kind of familiar with this for some time because I've been taking astaxanthin for like 15 years or so. Like I'm an early adopter, I guess.
You're one of the rare people that we meet that is actually knows what it is, knows how to pronounce it, and has been taking it for so many years.
I've been taking it for a very long time.
Yeah, well, it's a testament to your knowledge and research in the space to be finding things that are important for health, longevity, and cognitive health, et cetera.
Yeah, I don't know what it was about those. How I even stumbled on it to begin with, but I was just the research is really compelling, and there's a lot of research on it.
Yeah, well, actually, so I started with astaxanthin in the late 90s as a high school summer job, working in the ponds growing microalgae that produced the astaxanthin kind of on a farming approach to astaxanthin. And at the time, there's only a couple hundred peer-reviewed papers with astaxanthin and no human clinical studies. There have been some very robust safety studies because in order for the FDA to allow the fish farmers to use astaxanthin in the feed, there had to be extensive safety testing before approval of that. So that was what was known at the time. But since then, like you said, there's been an explosion of research. And so there's now more than 3,000 peer-reviewed papers. There's probably around 100 human clinical studies. So there's just been all this research in the whole international research community. Our team has contributed a bunch of research as well. We've collaborated with the National Institutes of Health on a longevity study that we can talk more about later. So it's been really exciting to see all this research, and the more you dig, the more exciting it is.
What I find so fascinating is that these algal species are sitting at the top of the riverbed, exposed constantly to the rays of the sun, which are DNA damaging over time, I would assume, in algae as it can be to humans when we're overexposed. And because the algae can't just swim away, it's sort of like these plant defense compounds that we often hear about. They're generated as a response to that stress as a protective mechanism. And so I've always thought that it was so cool that these algal species generate this antioxidant that seems to be one of the most powerful antioxidants in nature that are then subsequently consumed by seafood, salmon, flamingos as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's the same thing with flamingos, that they would be gray without astaxanthin as part of their diet. And so, like you said, microalgae plants, they produce these molecules that help them survive, and that's why they survived. And then they get consumed, and those protective molecules are conserved up and help other species. And so, like you said, astaxanthin is a really powerful antioxidant, and it's really, a lot of people think of antioxidants as all the same. But they're really different in terms of how potent they are at scavenging free radicals and how they localize in the cells. And with astaxanthin, we've actually done research with a collaborator at Harvard that looked actually at the cellular membranes. They have a model membrane system, and they can actually measure the electron density across the membrane. And so you have these lipid bilayers that form the membranes, and you'll have a concentration of a bunch of electrons at the polar heads and less at the phospholipid tails. And when you insert astaxanthin into that membrane, it doesn't disrupt that electron profile, that electron distribution that they measure with X-ray diffraction. Whereas if you put other antioxidants or even other carotenoids that are not as polar, if you look at, say, at beta carotene and you look at astaxanthin and you Google the chemical structure for those, to the untrained eye, they may look almost identical. But in the ring groups at the end of the molecules, you have these hydroxyl and ketone groups on astaxanthin that give it polarity and allow it to span and anchor across the membrane. And because of that, it doesn't disrupt the membrane. It allows the membrane to stay nice and ordered. Whereas with beta carotene, for example, it'll get in and perturb or disturb the membrane. And that can have a profound impact on your cellular health. It makes the membrane more prone to oxidation, lipid peroxidation, which impacts all types of issues. And astaxanthin not only gets to the plasma or the outer membrane of the cell, but it gets to the membranes of the nucleus, so protecting the DNA, and also the membranes, importantly, of the mitochondria, so supporting energy production and so many vital cellular processes. So the fact that astaxanthin gets to these membranes and is actually distributed systemically throughout the body. So it gets to your liver, gets to your heart, gets to your brain. So it's going to all these major organs, gets into these cellular membranes, spans and stabilizes the membranes, protects them against oxidative stress. And it does so in a way that, because it spans the membrane, it can fight free radicals both inside and outside the membrane, which is very unique. So it's like, how did nature come up with this molecule? But it actually, when you look at the evolution of carotenoids, it actually started with something simple like lycopene, which is a much simpler chemical structure. And then if you look at the evolution, nature tinkered with it and ended up arriving at astaxanthin as kind of like the king of the carotenoids after, the apex carotenoid after all of these other carotenoids. And it seems like that was finally the one that worked the best.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's so cool. Yeah, lycopene I'm familiar with. It's found, I think, in tomato products, most commonly associated
Yeah.
with prostate cancer, being able to protect the prostate.
Exactly.
Beta carotene, really good for eye health. I have talked for years about lutein and zeaxanthin, which are two other carotenoids,
Yeah.
which there's a bounty of evidence showing how supportive they are of eye health, of brain health. But I pulled this super interesting line from a paper published by noted longevity researcher Bruce Ames in 2018, who wrote that astaxanthin seems to be able to prevent lipid peroxidation in membranes considerably more potently than either lutein or zeaxanthin.
Yeah.
And we have all this research now looking at lutein and zeaxanthin specifically on brain health and eye health, and so it's fascinating, as you referred to it, the king of carotenoids. I mean, that's quite a title.
Yeah. And so that research we did with our collaborator at Harvard actually had lutein and zeaxanthin in that same system and showed that, astaxanthin, like you said, had better reduction of lipid peroxidation, less disturbance of the membrane. And if you look at the chemical structures, zeaxanthin and lutein are quite similar to each other, a slight minor difference, but compared to astaxanthin, they don't have the additional ketone group that gives the astaxanthin, I think, more polarity and kind of allows it to span that membrane and fight free radicals a little bit better. But with lutein and zeaxanthin, they're kind of, I like to think of them as almost like astaxanthin for the eye, because there's I believe a receptor that allows lutein and zeaxanthin to get to the eye, and they're naturally part of the macula. As their levels go down, the risk of age-related macular degeneration goes up. So those are inversely correlated. So those are just particularly great for the eye. Astaxanthin supports eye health as well, but more in proximity, not directly localizing, as lutein and zea do. But still, with the blood flow in and around the eye, it's there and helps a lot. But importantly, astaxanthin crosses the blood-brain barrier, and so it gets into the cells of the brain and can help against oxidative stress, inflammation, which is hugely important.
You hear terms like oxidative stress and inflammation a lot. How is a compound that can potentially pump the brakes on these processes beneficial from the standpoint of longevity?
Well, with longevity, things are happening over not just years, but decades, and so you have this progression of, in the case of inflammation, chronic inflammation, low-grade inflammation that's just smoldering, like this little fire that's there that's just over time degrading everything. And with oxidative stress, it's the same thing. You think about, you have a vehicle, you have a car, you have a frame and suspension components, and those, rust over time. And just over time, age takes its toll. And so you can do things to be proactive and preventative, and that's where something like astaxanthin comes in, where it goes in and supports the natural function of the cells. It helps to bolster the endogenous system. So you have, built-in antioxidant defense systems, but those, get tired over time and get overwhelmed, and they need support and replenishment. And so astaxanthin helps to go in and pick up the slack and help fight off the free radicals that are increasing as we age. It's very different than other anti-inflammatories, for example, where a lot of people know of over-the-counter anti-inflammatories, like ibuprofen or aspirin, and these are things that do reduce inflammation, but they do it in a way that's not necessarily natural. You go in and inhibit one thing chronically, which may address the immediate concern, but that's not how the body was meant to function. And so astaxanthin goes in and helps to restore homeostasis or balance by reducing the excess, problems that are happening, but not doing something where you go extreme in one direction. So it's something that if you're looking at aging and longevity, you want to do things that are conducive to long-term health, not just a quick fix that's going to cause a problem down the road.
Yeah, and like NSAID drugs, for example, they are anti-inflammatory, but chronic use of NSAID drugs is associated with cardiovascular events, gastric bleeding, and things like that.
And that's because they're not doing things that the body was designed to do. They're just fixing one issue, but then creating something else, down the road. And so with astaxanthin, you're restoring that balance and allowing the cells to function normally. And so, but with that said, there are studies like a rodent model where they looked at prednisolone, like gold standard anti-inflammatory, they looked at the reduction of TNF alpha, which is a cytokine, a major inflammatory actor. It's a target of major rheumatoid arthritis drugs. And they showed that with astaxanthin compared to prednisolone, you got the same reduction of TNF alpha at the same dose. And so it's a very potent anti-inflammatory as well, even though it works very differently rather than inhibiting like TNF alpha, for example, like some drugs do. So this is really important with the longevity space, where when you do this, you can actually benefit mitochondrial function. So you ward off mitochondrial dysfunction, support healthy energy production. You can protect, like we talked about, the lipids, the membranes from oxidative stress, but also the DNA and proteins, which if those become oxidized, that can be very bad. And through all these, kind of cellular benefits, you'll find improvements with autophagy, so kind of cellular cleanup. You'll reduce cellular senescence and kind of the zombie cells, as some may refer to. And so these are all hugely important. Apoptosis or cellular death, which happens as you're aging and is a normal process, but is something that can go out of whack when things are not functioning properly. And so astaxanthin supports all these through impacts on important cellular mechanisms and cellular pathways.
And it seems to have a robust safety profile. I mean, it is a nutrient that is found as a natural part of the food matrix.
Yeah, it's something that has been shown to be very safe throughout all the the creatures that consume astaxanthin. Humans have been eating astaxanthin for thousands of years, but not everything that's natural is safe, and so it's important to also confirm that with safety testing. And so, like I mentioned, with the safety studies that were done before astaxanthin was approved as a color additive for the fish feed, which is how it's referred to as from a regulatory standpoint for the FDA, it's just a color additive, even though it's actually so much more than that. But there was basically the same type of toxicity testing that you would do for a pharmaceutical drug that's in development. They had to do that for astaxanthin. So you had acute toxicity, like single dose, very high, thousands of milligrams per kilogram of body weight. Whereas in humans, we may take a fraction of a milligram per kilogram of body weight. So compared to thousands of milligrams per kilogram of body weight being tested in these single dose tox studies. There's also been subchronic, which are several months of toxicity testing at very high doses. There's been 1 and 2 year chronic toxicity studies, carcinogenicity studies, mutagenicity, genotox, we're looking at DNA damage, also reproductive toxicity to show that it doesn't affect mothers and offspring. And so very extensive, robust battery of safety testing has been done. In addition, mechanistically, the way it works, kind of supports the fact that it would be so safe, because you're not, like I said, going in and chronically inhibiting anything. You're going in and almost like a bouncer at a club, you're there to make sure everything's in order, and if things get out of control, you step in and help, but you're not doing something all the time to just inhibit or activate something that was not necessarily meant to be always on or always off.
There is a concern when taking high doses of certain antioxidants, like vitamin C, for example, in the peri-workout window around workouts, that taking high dose antioxidants might negatively impact, counterintuitively perhaps, the stimulus that's required to adapt and grow stronger from a given workout. Do we have any evidence to say whether or not this is true for ASTA?
Yeah, so there's been nothing to show that it would be detrimental to that. Astaxanthin has actually been tested for against sarcopenia, which is muscle deterioration or wasting away as you age. And so we found, or the researchers found, that astaxanthin actually increased muscle strength and size in that population. And then I guess this would be considered anecdotally, but the Ironman triathletes and a lot in the endurance field and related fitness fields do use astaxanthin a lot, and so I believe if there were major issue with kind of being counteractive or counterproductive to training, that it wouldn't be so well adopted in these kind of very extreme intensity sporting activities.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How would you stack it compared to? There are lots of compounds now that are, I guess, buzz terms within the so-called longevity community, compounds like NMN, metformin, rapamycin. I know that many of these compounds have a double-edged sword effect where they might show an improvement in certain age-related markers, but then, for example, with metformin, there is a blunting of the exercise adaptation effect. With rapamycin, there seems to be a negative impact on the immune system over time because it's an immunosuppressant, essentially. NMN, there have been some papers that have come out that have flagged it potentially in the setting of oncogenesis, cancer, for example. So how would you compare astaxanthin to compounds like those?
Yeah, so astaxanthin works on a lot of the same pathways. For example, rapamycin acts on mTOR, the mammalian target of rapamycin is named after. And so astaxanthin activates the AMPK pathway, which as a downstream effect impacts mTOR. It also impacts the sirtuins, NRF2, FOXO3. And so there's mechanistically, there's a lot of overlap. But I think where it localizes in cells is different and how it acts in the cells is different. So it's not necessarily an either or. But interestingly, we did this study with the National Institutes of Health, specifically the National Institute on Aging, that funded the interventions testing program, which has been around for 20 years. And it's really a gold standard in longevity or lifespan research in a mammalian model, because ideally you would test everything in humans, right? But with longevity, you have to take decades, to find anything that works. And so they have a mouse model where they have genetically heterogeneous mice that are meant to be much more human-like than the normal inbred lab strains where you can have very, kind of strange findings or things that are not necessarily translatable to humans. It may work in that model, but would not have relevance to humans. And so this program has been around for 20 years, and it's conducted at 3 different sites in parallel, in triplicate. So you have the University of Michigan, the University of Texas, and the Jackson Lab in Maine. And they have identical conditions. They have thousands of mice each year that are specifically bred for this program. You'll have 5 or 6 different test agents each year that are selected. And you'll have the rapamycins of the world, metformin, NMN, all of those are considered, and anyone can make a proposal to this group for an agent to be tested. It could be a supplement, it could be a drug, it could be a botanical extract, it can be anything. But if it warrants and if it has great supporting data, they'll pick a few lucky ones each year. And so in 2019, we were selected. Astaxanthin was selected, in particular, our form of astaxanthin we supplied to them, and it was based on preliminary research showing that not only did astaxanthin extend lifespan in other model organisms like C. elegans worms, fruit flies, and yeast, which are typically used for basic research, and also a lot of the mechanistic impacts that I mentioned. But importantly, we also demonstrated with our collaborators at the University of Hawaii that we were able to increase FOXO3 activation in the heart tissue of mice. And FOXO3 is known as an anti-aging gene that really rose to prominence out of a lot of research actually from Hawaii. The Honolulu Heart Program followed thousands of Japanese American men for decades from the 60s onward, and tracked every doctor's visit, every lab test, every reason they got sick or passed away. And so it became this amazing trove of data, and has informed a lot of longevity and related science. And so from that, it was learned that FOXO3 has this really important role in aging. And everyone has the FOXO3 gene, but if you have a particular version of it, you're 3 times more likely to live to 100 healthy. And if you don't, you can actually supplement potentially with astaxanthin, which is the hypothesis. We wanted to see if you have one of the other versions of the gene, could you actually activate it to be more active like the best protective version? And that's what we demonstrated, that it did do that. And so with that finding together with everything else, the NIH group said, hey, let's go ahead and throw this in our model, the Interventions Testing Program, or the ITP. So in 2019, they started, and this wasn't something where you started the mice when they're born and you got to do it from birth through the end of life. This was started at 12 months of age, which for these mice would be the equivalent of being in your 40s.
It's like midlife.
Midlife,
for a mouse.
yeah.
Wow.
So kind of when people are starting to think about longevity and health, and seeing impacts of aging on themselves and loved ones. And so this is when it's actually relevant, of course, and the earlier the better to start. But in this case, so they started in middle age, and then followed them throughout the rest of their life. And it turns out that that astaxanthin extended lifespan in these mice by 12% with very, very high statistical significance. And this was a really important finding because this is the same program that put rapamycin on the map as a longevity agent. Because before, like you said, it was a immunosuppressant. It was used for transplants and in various drug applications unrelated to longevity. But with this program showing that rapamycin extended lifespan, that's what really brought it to prominence. And then since they replicated it as have others. But there's been no other agent tested in this ITP program that actually is safe enough to take every day. Like with rapamycin, a lot of people are trying to take it. They're doing different doses, or even there's research into different analogs or derivatives of rapamycin to see if you can, work around some of the side effect or tolerability issues that you'll find with it. But with astaxanthin, you have an excellent safety profile, and you actually extended lifespan more than 10%, which is, again, the first agent to do a lifespan extension of more than 10% that's safe enough for everyday use and broadly accessible as a supplement. And there's been a handful of other agents, only 5 other agents that have extended lifespan more than 10% in this model in the last 20 years. But none of those other 5 have that same safety profile or broad accessibility. And like you mentioned, metformin, not NMN, but NR, it's a related precursor to NAD, curcumin, fish oil, fisetin, other agents like these that are very popular in the longevity space, resveratrol, have all been tested in this ITP program and didn't work, didn't extend life. And so it's not to say that they don't have beneficial effects, but in this gold standard lifespan model, astaxanthin has proven to work, and I think be very special because of that.
It's so freaking cool. I mean, I remember writing about astaxanthin and the FOXO3 pathway, the impact of astaxanthin on the FOXO3 pathway in Genius Foods, my first book.
Yeah.
So I've been taking it since at least the initial manuscript for the book. Yeah, and rapamycin, correct me if I'm wrong, but even though it's garnered all this buzz in the longevity space, it inhibits mTOR, which is crucial for building and maintaining muscle and strength. Which would seem to me very counterproductive. If you're taking a drug that's chronically inhibiting mTOR, that would be promotive of longevity.
Yeah, I think it's this fine balance, like with a lot of biology, where too much, can be good or bad, and the opposite can be good or bad. And so in the case of rapamycin, impacting mTOR, you can have impacts on autophagy or other longevity-related mechanisms, but it can also have, other actions that are not as positive. And so that's why I think nothing's an easy answer. You don't want to always turn something on or off. You want to do it in a way that's kind of measured and balanced and does it within the confines of the natural working environment of the cell. And so I think with astaxanthin, it's not as potent of a longevity lifespan extender as rapamycin because, for instance, it doesn't act on mTOR chronically like rapamycin would. But I think that's a benefit for astaxanthin because it allows it to have that safety, and allow the cell to function normally without impacting mTOR or sirtuins or any other pathway in a way that is not intended naturally.
Yeah.
And whereas it's kind of analogous to like the NSAIDs or other anti-inflammatories where astaxanthin may act on similar pathways or the same pathways, but not in that chronic, way. And so it's a very different type of mechanism. Even if you're looking at the same pathways, you're doing it in a way that, if it's too high or too low, you're having an impact, but you're not chronically doing something all the way on or all the way off all the time.
Yeah. And also, like a compound like rapamycin might extend lifespan, but what is it doing to quality of life if it's having a negative potential impact on muscle strength, for example?
Yeah, exactly. And other issues that are unpleasant, and you'll hear about different, issues that people experience with rapamycin. And so, yeah, you want to not only extend lifespan, but you want to extend health span. And so with astaxanthin, longevity is just a piece of it, or lifespan is just a piece of it. Health span, which I think is an important part of longevity, of course, is something that astaxanthin does impact. And so because it gets to your liver, it gets to your heart, gets to your brain, joints, muscles, it has impacts on all of these things. And so not only are you potentially, hopefully living longer, but if you look at heart health, we've seen reductions of cholesterol and triglycerides and oxidized LDL, blood pressure. There's been really important research, and it's a little bit of a gray area because we've done pharmaceutical research as well as kind of research that supports supplement usages. But in the case of the pharmaceutical research, we've demonstrated prevention of blood clots, so primary and secondary thrombosis, plaque buildup in the arteries. So we had images of the aortic arch, in the heart, and you could look at the plaque buildup and see with the various dosing of astaxanthin the reduction of the plaque in the arteries. So you can have profound impacts on the heart health. In brain, you'll have increases in BDNF, which is really important for neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. There's been human studies with brain health showing improvements in various cognitive tests. So it could be like a maze learning test where you go through on a computer and work through a maze, and over time you get better, fewer errors, or get through it faster. Other types of computerized tests where you have to do memory or recall, and you get graded on correct versus incorrect answers or response times. All those types of tests. And so we've seen improvements in information processing, memory. And so, if you have a better functioning brain, if you have a better functioning heart, you have improvements in joint and muscle function. And anecdotally, a lot of people that utilize astaxanthin are using it for joint and muscle function. If you look at the reviews, for astaxanthin products, that's a big use because you can feel it, and if you're feeling better and you're more mobile and active, that supports everything. And it kind of has this follow-on effect where not only are you improving the health of your heart and your joints, but now maybe you're feeling better and you're going to be more active, which also has better effects as well. Even metabolic health. So, astaxanthin helps with all types of metabolic processes, insulin sensitivity, et cetera. And so it's something that if you look at it from, one side, it looks like it does all these different things. And you could say, well, how could it do all these things? But if you look at it from the other more foundational side and you think, okay, astaxanthin gets distributed throughout the body, gets to all these organs, gets to your cells, and is sitting in these membranes all throughout the cell, it's going to have an impact on all these important processes. And that's how, if you don't have that benefit and you have oxidative stress or inflammation in a particular area of the body, it'll manifest itself into a particular issue. But if you're addressing that systemically, you're going to, benefit yourself over the long run with a lot of these issues.
It's amazing. So is it acting, are we seeing all these benefits because it's systemically acting on these inflammatory markers, or is it actually, for example, for joint health, is it getting into the cells of the joints and how does that work?
Yeah, so well, if you think about reducing the oxidative stress in all of these locations, it has all these downstream effects, on inflammatory pathways and other cellular pathways. And so for the most part, it's getting into the cells, in the heart, in the brain, in the liver, and other major areas. And actually, going back to when you absorb astaxanthin, when you ingest it, it goes to your liver and gets packaged into lipoparticles, LDL, HDL, VLDL, and it hitches a ride on those throughout the body. And it actually prevents those from oxidation, like oxidized LDL, for example, but then it uses those as a transport vehicle. So it's going all throughout the body, on these, LDL and HDL particles.
Pickup trucks, basically.
Yeah. It's just hitching a ride. It's helping them out, and then it's getting to where it needs to go, and then helping out, the destination. And so in all these locations, in some cases, it could be a systemic, kind of peripheral approach, like in the eye, where maybe it's the blood, is carrying it. It may not be directly localizing in that tissue necessarily, but for the most part, it's localizing in most of your major, tissue stores and fighting off the effects of oxidative stress, inflammation, inflammaging, as it's referred to, where you have the interplay of aging and inflammation, where inflammation drives aging and aging drives inflammation. And so, disrupting, that cycle can be really important.
Talk about some of the benefits that have been seen in clinical trials with regard to skin health and appearance.
Yeah, that's another one that didn't even mention here, but you think about the microalgae, they produce it as a defense mechanism against UV light from the sun. And so just like the microalgae use it to protect against the sun, we can do the same. And there's been studies showing impacts both with oral and topical administration of astaxanthin on moisture content, elasticity, wrinkles. And so, sunlight causes damage, to the DNA and, in your skin cells. And if you can have astaxanthin on board, it can help. And it's not a replacement for sunscreen. It's not like an internal sunscreen or anything like that, but it's something that supports your skin health, and then together with sunscreen and other skin protection, that's a great way to go. But if you look at a lot of cosmetic products, antioxidants are a big feature in them, and we think astaxanthin is one of, if not the most important antioxidants that you could take. And so you get the skin health benefit as well, in addition to everything else that we talked about, which is also important as you age, and just not only as you age, but just for your overall skin health, which if you don't take care of your skin, can give you issues.
I mean, your skin is your largest organ. Mm-hmm. I've heard people debate that. Gabrielle Lyon likes to say that your musculature is your largest organ, but yeah.
Well, the good thing is Asta gets to both, so you can have both. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it's literally created as a response to the oxidative stress imposed by chronic exposure to the sun by these microalgal species. So it makes perfect sense that it would be. Like I've actually, I think, referred to it in the past as an internal sunscreen.
Yeah, I mean, it's a way you could think about it, but it wouldn't be an internal sunscreen instead of an external sunscreen. But it could be. The reason that we can't really say that is from an FDA standpoint. Yeah. Sunscreen, sunblock are considered drugs, and so they're regulated as such. And so with astaxanthin being a supplement, you can't technically say that, but you can think of it conceptually as something that protects your skin, internally, and then together with the sunscreens of the world, then that would be your optimal benefit.
Yeah. It's not gonna, prevent sunburn if you're being reckless.
Yeah, but a lot of people do report that they feel like their skin is doing better when they're out exposed to the sunlight, and so I think it's if you're gonna. You might as well have it on board to help, and absorb that, UV light and ward off the damages to your DNA and the other, cellular functions that can be impacted.
It's so freaking cool. So let's talk about supplementation. What would you say, is there a dose generally that's recommended in terms of supplementation so that one is able to reap all of these potential benefits? How is it best supplemented? What forms are available for people in terms of supplementation? Yeah, let's start there.
Yeah, so most people, well, first of all, when the first astaxanthin supplements came on the market, the doses were pretty low, maybe like 4 milligrams per capsule. And then over the years, they worked up to 12 milligrams per capsule. And that's kind of the standard capsule size that you'll see for a single dose, single ingredient astaxanthin supplement. And most people will take anywhere from 1 to maybe 2 or 4 capsules a day. Some people take even more. Like we've actually done a human clinical study in cardiovascular subjects where we dosed a high dose of 8 capsules or 96 milligrams a day for 3 months. Wow. And a lower dose of 2 capsules a day or 24 milligrams. And then we also had control. So we had it all completely masked. And that's where we actually demonstrated. And these were people that were very unhealthy. They had elevated inflammation and cholesterol and kind of cardiovascular issues, and they were on all the cardiovascular medications. But we showed on top of all of that we had reductions, in cholesterol and oxidized LDL and blood pressure. And so that was a human clinical study that we conducted, and that showed a range of dosing of 24 to 96 milligrams, being very helpful. But that's more of a specific use case that, most people are taking 1 or 2 capsules a day of 12 milligrams per capsule. So anywhere from that 1 to 2 to 4 capsules per day is kind of the sweet spot. And given the safety profile of astaxanthin, people can start with 1 or 2 a day and then figure out from there. They can try going up, they can try going down, and they can see how they feel after a few months. And in particular, you can measure biomarkers. So whenever you get your blood work done, you can look at those types of things like your HS-CRP, a measure of systemic inflammation associated with heart health, or your cholesterol or triglycerides or other important biomarkers, and see if you have impacts. And you can then go up or down and then see what works. Or maybe with your joint and muscle function, your endurance, your recovery, your energy, your sleep, you can see how you're feeling, how you're doing, and then adjust your dose. So that's how we recommend that people go about it. And then also it becomes a cost thing as well. How much do you want to take? How much do you want to spend? What else are you taking? How does it incorporate with the rest of your diet? How much salmon are you eating a week? For example. But which I think there's probably never enough. You could have it every night, and that'd be great. But another thing with supplements is that with astaxanthin is you have different sources. And so, like I mentioned, I started working with with astaxanthin back in high school in the late 90s, working in the ponds, growing the microalgae. And so I would sweep the ponds and work in the production fields there. And so that's the predominant source of the astaxanthin supplements on the market, is growing the microalgae. You're not going out into the natural environment and harvesting it, but you're doing a man-made farming approach, but you're still growing the microalgae. You have these big ponds. In our case, we were in Kona on the Big Island of Hawaii, in the lava fields, where the Ironman triathletes train. Brutal heat and sun. But it's great conditions for growing microalgae. It's hot, it's very sunny, and that's what the microalgae that's what actually prompts them to produce astaxanthin. Because people think of them as being red algae, but they're actually green algae when they start out their life, and then they only turn red when they produce the astaxanthin as a response to the sunlight. So these ponds, you'll see them, they're green, and then over time, after several days of exposure, then they'll turn more and more red, and then they get harvested. And then you have to kind of extract out the astaxanthin from that, algal matter. And it comes esterified with, attached to different amino or fatty acids, actually. And so you'll have predominantly monoesters. So you have astaxanthin attached to various fatty acids on one side of the molecule. You have some diesters where astaxanthin is attached to two fatty acids, and you have some non-esterified, just free astaxanthin. So you have this mixture of astaxanthin components as well as other stuff from the algae. And even after all years of improvements, it only is 5 or 10% astaxanthin that you get in the algae, in the extract. And then the rest is just other stuff from the algae, which is not the active ingredient that you're looking for. There's issues with, just making it consistent and very pure every batch. And so after we did that for a few years, we recognized, the health benefits there, and thought, actually, maybe this could even be a pharmaceutical, given that it could impact all these important, health issues. And so we started to go and look at how pharmaceuticals are made and go to the laboratory and try to reproduce astaxanthin. And we worked with some great manufacturers to make a nature identical form of astaxanthin using natural product total synthesis. So you basically synthesize from scratch the astaxanthin molecule, and you get the exact same chemical structure. You can get the same isomer. There's a few different isomeric forms of astaxanthin, but they're all present in nature. They all have demonstrated safety and efficacy. And so we've been able to produce astaxanthin with really high purity and consistency when we're doing pharmaceutical research in a pharmaceutical manner. And then after a decade or so of pharmaceutical research, after the 2008 financial crisis hit, the ability to fund that program was no longer feasible. So we pivoted back and brought the learnings and the expertise from the pharmaceutical research back to the supplement side and said, let's apply these learnings. Let's bring this really rigorous production technology to the supplement world, and then launched a supplement form of astaxanthin based on natural product total synthesis. So in our case, we have really, really high purity. It's just the astaxanthin molecule. It's consistent batch to batch. You know exactly what's in every capsule. And importantly, it's formulated in a way that makes it really bioavailable. And so it's actually really hard to make astaxanthin well absorbed in the body. If you just produce it in a lab and put it in a capsule, you won't absorb anything because it's really tightly packed, almost like the brick. It has this crystalline structure that packs tightly together. Your body can't really do much with it. But if you can take that crystalline astaxanthin and disperse it into a cloudy matrix, which is what we do with this kind of a starch-based formulation, it allows the astaxanthin to be dispersed and then absorbed nicely by the gut. And we actually did a head-to-head human study because we wanted to compare how well would this work compared to the normal astaxanthin products on the market. And we got a group of human volunteers, gave them a dose of the microalgal astaxanthin product, measured their blood levels over the course of a day at multiple time points, and then had them wash out for a week without taking any astaxanthin, and then gave them our form at the same dose, the same group of people, and again measured their blood over the course of a day. And we found that we got 3 times the blood levels of astaxanthin from the same dose.
Wow.
Both the maximum concentration and the total exposure over 24 hours. So you got 3 times more in rather than passing the rest through you without being absorbed into the body. So that significant improvement allows you to benefit so much more from every capsule. So those are some of the key differences with the supplements. But with that said, I'll mention that first and foremost, I'm a believer and we're believers in astaxanthin and proponents of astaxanthin. And so if anyone just takes astaxanthin, I think that's a win. Right now, we're currently marketing a product that is utilizing the natural product total synthesis produced version of astaxanthin. But in the future, we have plans to also add back in microalgal forms of astaxanthin as well, just because we want to offer, all the best sources that you could get, and people can choose what works best for them, because we think, if more people are taking, or if everyone could take astaxanthin, the world would be a lot healthier place.
Yeah. Yeah. Before I had met you, I was taking, and I'd been taking 12 milligrams a day of astaxanthin, but I've upped my dose to 24 milligrams. So I guess 2 AX3 capsules every day is what I currently take, and what I've been taking for the past, I would say, 6 months or so. I know there's some that you're supposed to take it with fat. Why is that?
Well, it's a lipophilic fat-soluble molecule, and so when you ingest it orally, if you have other fats in that are going through your gut at the same time, it can stimulate the absorption of astaxanthin, and this is the same for other carotenoids as well. And so if you don't, you may pass some through. And so similar to if people eat beets, this is a highly pigmented compound, and so it can color the stool if it's not fully absorbed. And it's not to be concerned if that happens, but it just means that some got through. But if you ever take some of the powder out of the capsule and mix it in water, or I know, like, if you step on a capsule and it explodes on the floor, like it can be a mess, and so if any is not absorbed, you'll see that coloration. But for the most part, especially with our really highly bioavailable formulation, and if you take it with a meal, then most of it, if not all, gets absorbed, and you don't pass anything noticeably through into the stool, which is great, because you want to be utilizing everything rather than flushing it away.
Yeah, especially if you're spending money on it.
Yeah.
So you need to take the synthetic form still needs to be taken with fat as well, even though it has 3 times the bioavailability.
It does, yeah. And so the clinical study we did was with a standard meal that has a fat component, and it's not that you wouldn't absorb it, you'll just absorb it better with a meal. Yeah. In
what proximity do they need to be taken? Do they need to be taken together, or if you had a fatty meal an hour prior, does that still work?
Yeah, we haven't tested with and then 30 minutes later, an hour later, and several hours later, and so couldn't say specifically. But the idea is that you want the gut to be processing the food at the same time, and so ideally, with or shortly after the meal would probably be the best advice. But you can also experiment on your own, where if you were to take it a few hours later and you find that your stool is becoming colored, or you're maybe not finding the same benefits, then maybe you could try experimenting, taking it closer. But I think just as a matter of habit, it's easier to just take it after you eat dinner, for example, or lunch or breakfast, and that's probably just easy for habit, and certainly going to be the most conducive to absorption.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely experimented with all kinds of compounds, especially now. I get sent so many different things, but it's very funny that astaxanthin is something that has stood the test of time in terms of my staple supplement regimen, and yeah, I'm just a big believer in carotenoids, and astaxanthin too. It has the capacity that the molecule has to span the cellular membrane, to me, is protecting it essentially from the inside and from the outside. Because mitochondria generate reactive oxygen species, and cells can be. We always think about cells being damaged from without, but they can also potentially be damaged from within. And so it just stands to reason to me that having a cellular protector such as astaxanthin would be beneficial.
For sure, yeah. With the mitochondria, those are your little energy power plants of the cells, and as byproducts of that energy production, they're producing free radicals, like you said, and that damages the cell. Those little free radicals want to interact and engage with other things and cause damage, and astaxanthin is the perfect molecule to neutralize those free radicals by donating or accepting an electron, and so localizing in the mitochondrial membranes it impacts mitochondrial function. We've seen an interesting study both in young and old canines that you saw increases in ATP and energy production with astaxanthin administration. So it is really important to support the function of the mitochondria, but also, like you said, deal with the effects of the byproducts of the energy production. Which, if you think about an energy production facility, you'll have like those, smokestacks and a lot of pollution coming out. It's kind of the same thing where, they're producing the energy, but, there's byproducts because you're breathing the oxygen, you're consuming the nutrients, and then the mitochondria take those and create the energy. But you have these, pollutant products that come out that need to be addressed. And you have these endogenous systems that over time, deteriorate and are no longer as effective as you age. And so that's where astaxanthin can really help to step in.
Yeah, especially when overfed too, as so many are today. Mitochondria are just flooded with energy, and it essentially creates like a backup in the system and accelerates the generation of free radicals, reactive oxygen species, and subsequently, ultimately over time, mitochondrial dysfunction, which has now become a big buzz term in the setting of chronic disease, but also with regards to mental illness. Chris Palmer's a psychiatrist who's done a lot of really, I think, interesting work revealing the connection between mitochondrial dysfunction and certain conditions, certain mental conditions.
Well, if you look at almost any major issue of the brain, of the heart, of, any issue in the body, you're going to find, whether you Google it or go to PubMed and look for, what is a core driver, you'll often find oxidative stress, inflammation, mitochondrial dysfunction. These are all issues that wreak havoc in all these areas and then manifest themselves as a different disorder. But inflammation, oxidative stress, these are all, kind of core drivers of these issues. And so that's one of the really interesting things, like with astaxanthin, is if you go to Google or go to PubMed and you search astaxanthin and, fill in the blank, health issue, you'll find, some preliminary research in a lot of these areas. And so it's a really exciting opportunity to learn more about these health issues and how potentially astaxanthin, could help.
Yeah, I think it's so cool. I mean, I remember reading that paper by Bruce Ames in 2018 where he highlighted what he called putative longevity vitamins. And there were, lutein and zeaxanthin were in there. There were certain, other more esoteric antioxidants, some vitamins and minerals like magnesium, which, we talk about a lot on this show and just in general. But I loved seeing astaxanthin in there.
Yeah. No, it's great because a lot of people don't know about it. And so, but those that do, it's great to see, them talking about it and to get some exposure for astaxanthin, because I think it's been somewhat under the radar. But I do think that, with studies like the interventions testing program and everything else, that more and more people will learn about astaxanthin, and it should be part of everyone's longevity regimen. It really is a longevity vitamin, like you said, because it's demonstrated increases in lifespan in multiple different models. It impacts mechanisms of aging that we understand. It has mechanistically impacts on all these different other health issues, and it has an excellent safety profile. So why wouldn't you want to have this on board as another foundational supplement? So everyone you can take your multivitamins and probiotics and everything else, but this is something that should definitely be incorporated for almost anyone. It's pretty rare to find someone that would not benefit from astaxanthin.
Yeah. Totally. So what's next for AX3? I'm obviously a huge fan of astaxanthin. I'm a huge fan of the work that you're doing. I love that you're boots on the ground actually pushing this research forward. Super impressive. So do you have any plans to expand the product line? I know you guys just have this one product, which I love, I take every day.
Yeah.
But yeah, what's next for you guys?
Yeah, so we want to expand the product line to not only offer, like I said, the synthetic form, which scientifically we believe is the most pure, the most bioavailable form, but certainly having a natural source version from microalgae, I think, would also be beneficial, because we don't want to create any barriers to entry for people that would be averse to a synthetic form, which I think without context and nuance and understanding the reasoning behind it can scare people off. And so the most important thing is for people to learn about astaxanthin and to take astaxanthin. And we probably want to offer both of those going forward. So that's a future plan. In addition, we currently have capsules, but some people prefer to take a powder form, mix it into a morning drink. or to take a gummy form, for example. So we just want to make accessible forms, just so that, again, lower that barrier to entry for people, and just to get exposed to astaxanthin. So that's really our plan on the product side. And then separately, though, the other big mission is to create awareness and kind of evangelize astaxanthin, because more people need to know about it, and so it's conversations like these that help, because if you just see astaxanthin on the shelf at a store or online somewhere, you're probably not going to know what it is or what it's for. And so I think it's a really important mission to have conversations like these.
Any plans to do a line of pet products?
Yes, actually. So a lot of people do take our capsules and mix it into their pet food or pet treats, or I'll take some and put it in peanut butter and give it to my dog. I know, like in your case, you've mixed it into cat food for your cat, and so it's amazing because it can benefit our furry friends as well, and we have veterinarians that use the product as well with their quote patients, to support their health. And so right now, you can give your dog a capsule or open it up and mix it up in food for your cat or dog, or even mini pigs. There's all different types of animals that have consumed astaxanthin for benefits as pets. But we'll make kind of treat accessible forms that make it a little bit more easy and convenient to give to your pet as well. That's for sure a future plan. So, and then perhaps something for skin health as well, like a topical, because orally, benefits your skin, but a topical, would also be beneficial. So,
well, how do you get around the fact that it's so pigmented?
Yeah, you can put a little bit in that, but that is the thing. There are some products that are utilizing it, so it's possible to not create a bright red skin cream. It looks like war paint or something. Yeah, but you're protected against the sun. So, but no, I think there are ways to incorporate it in, probably at lower levels, and then you get the higher level from the oral, I would imagine. But that's kind of the fleshing out the product line is definitely one of our plans. One other thing is there's been some requests for people that want to measure their blood levels of astaxanthin, say more like in the biohacking community that really are highly engaged with the exact levels of every nutrient and really mapping what effect they're getting with the blood levels, because just because you take a capsule doesn't mean you absorb all of it. It can vary from anyone person to person with not just astaxanthin but anything, and so if you were to have an accessible test to measure your astaxanthin blood levels, then you could compare and see, this person had an effect at this level, I want to do the same, or this study showed an effect at this level, I want to do the same. And that's actually to back up to the dosing, that NIH study on longevity, when we looked at the blood levels in those animals, and then looked at the blood levels that we've seen in our human studies, the equivalent dose would be in that 1 to 2 capsule range. And so knowing the blood levels really helps you map the dose that would work best for you. And so it's not like, the mice had such a high level in the longevity study that you'd have to eat, spoonfuls of the product every day. It's 1 or 2 capsules was achieve the same plasma concentration of astaxanthin as the rodent study. But that's something where, again, if you had that broadly accessible to the human population, then people could even dive into it further, and there'd be a lot of really interesting findings, I think, in terms of use cases and correlated blood levels.
Super interesting. Yeah, when do you see that coming to market? Like a blood test?
It would, I think, in the next couple of years. I mean, we already have the methods developed that we use for our research, but it's just not a consumer accessible version. You have to send it to a specialized lab and spend a bunch of money for it to be analyzed. But a test kit could be developed. So I think that's something that in the future we would definitely plan to bring out. There's no specific timeline on that, but I think it's definitely on the horizon for sure.
Yeah. So I take 24 milligrams a day. I give my cat a little bit. I think what I do is I've broken open one of your capsules, which, by the way, I mean, it's a lot easier to do with your capsules as opposed to the microalgal form, which, because we
have the powder.
Yeah. You have the powder. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the thing. So if people don't want to take a capsule, they can actually just take the capsule and open it up and put it into water or into any other type of liquid, and it'll kind of disperse right into it.
Yeah. So I mix it in because I give my cat collagen as well a little bit. It's not like I'm throwing supplements at my cat. That would probably be very, very irresponsible. But in general, I know that her food I give her food that contains wild salmon. So, I mean, right there, I know that she's ingesting, that astaxanthin is a natural part of her diet. And cats are obligate carnivores, so I know that they generally in the wild will consume collagenous tissue, and collagen I think is really beneficial from a longevity standpoint. It's great for joints and the like as well. So I'll mix a little bit of I'll break open one of your capsules and I'll put it into this. I have a jar where I keep some collagen, maybe 100 grams of collagen, and then I'll break open one or two of your capsules and I'll mix it in. I'll shake it up, and then every time I give her wet food, I'll mix in about 4 grams of collagen, which has probably like a couple milligrams of AX3 astaxanthin in it. And because I want her to be around forever. So, and it just stands to reason, like the NIH's interventions testing program. I mean, mice are obviously mammals. Cats, generally will eat astaxanthin as part of a diet if it contains salmon, and so it seems like a really safe thing from my view.
That sounds like an amazing product. That should be on the market.
Yeah.
So make it easier for everyone to have. And no, but that's a great approach, and I think a lot of people would love to support their pets, with astaxanthin as well, and so that would be something that we would love to bring out, as soon as we could, for sure. But like you said, I mean, you can do it now, with the capsules and mix it into their food or treats, however you'd like. So it's awesome. Accessible in that way.
Well, anything else you want to add?
I think last thing I'll mention that could be helpful for people if they're looking at our package in particular. You'll find that the active ingredient, of course, is astaxanthin. But if you look at the other ingredients, you'll see some other things listed there, like modified food starch. You'll see, cornstarch, glucose syrup, and you'll be like, wow, what is this crap, quite frankly? And those are components of the formulation that make it bioavailable. And so these are very low levels. If you're eating starches in the diet, you're going to be consuming grams of starch or sugar, for example. The amounts, of starch in a capsule are, fractions of a gram. The amount of glucose syrup or sugar is, which helps to kind of hold the whole formulation together, is less than 1/10 of half a gram. And from an FDA standpoint, if you were to make a beverage or a food, you would be considered sugar-free if you are below the threshold of half a gram of sugar. We're less than 1/10 of that per capsule, so it's negligible. It's from an FDA standpoint, it would be sugar-free. But the reason we have these, like I mentioned before, is that the formulation allows astaxanthin to be dispersed into this cloudy matrix where you have the starch that creates this matrix for astaxanthin to be spread out amongst, and then the glucose syrup kind of holds it together. The cornstarch makes it so it doesn't all stick together, but that's really important to make it bioavailable. And so that's the reason for those ingredients. They're not like a filler or anything like that. I mean, they're there for a performance, functional purpose. And again, from a dietary standpoint, they're negligible compared to what you'd be consuming in the diet. And then you also have, for example, sodium ascorbate or vitamin C, or alpha tocopherol or vitamin E in there, which are not there. They are antioxidants, but they're not there for health benefit purposes. They're actually there to be sacrificial antioxidants to protect the astaxanthin from oxygen in the air, because we want astaxanthin to be an antioxidant in your body, not on the shelf. And so vitamin C and vitamin E are there to ward off oxygen, and fight off moisture and air. And allow astaxanthin to be remaining intact, to help you. So that's why they're there, as well, for example. Otherwise, we have vegetable cellulose, which is the vegetable capsule material, and we have a small amount of microcrystalline cellulose, which is an inert pulp substance, which because we're trying to give a specific dose of astaxanthin, and we do include overage to make sure that there's more than enough per capsule, but capsules you can't just make a capsule in any size you want. There's certain standard sizes, and if we were to fill up the capsule completely with astaxanthin, it would just be too much. You'd be dosing like way too much per capsule. But if we went down a size capsule, you wouldn't have enough per capsule. So you're stuck with a little bit of space in there. So we put the microcrystalline cellulose, or MCC, in there, which is somewhat of a filler, if you will, but it's inert, and it's there so that the capsule is not just partially full. But it's not because we're underdosing the astaxanthin. If anything, we have overage. It's more just that you're kind of stuck between two capsule sizes. But that's the reason for that to be in there.
And you don't even absorb cellulose,
You don't even
right?
absorb
It's like
it.
it's an insoluble fiber.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but that's why it's there. And then also we have vegetable stearate, which acts as a lubricant, which again, same thing, is it's not doing anything from a health standpoint. But we found in our early production days that when you filled the capsules with the astaxanthin formulation, the little beadlets of the astaxanthin suspended in the starch matrix would stick on the rim of the capsule. And then when you take the two ends of the capsule and slide it together, it would cause the capsule to potentially crack or break, but not necessarily right there on the line. So you'd have a cracked capsule, and then you put it into the package, and then in transit, then it breaks open. And so you'd have broken capsules because the formulation was getting stuck on the rim. And so the vegetable stearate helps to lubricate and allow it to flow into the capsule. So that's the reason for that. And then finally, when you have the astaxanthin beadlet formulation, that's a very dark, powder. And then, which, by the way, if you put it in water, turns bright red, but it's almost looks black. It's like a deep violet. It's super dark. Then you have the cellulose, and you have the vegetable stearate, which are white. So you have the salt and pepper mix of powder in the capsule, which again, initially we had clear capsules, and we have this salt and pepper looking mixture, and it looks a little strange. You're like, is this how it's supposed to be? Should it all be dark or light? And so we thought, okay, this is potentially confusing, and so let's just go with a white vegetable capsule. So that was what we ended up going to, just for more uniformity of aesthetics, so it's not something that would be concerning. And so that's the reason for the titanium dioxide, which is the white component of the capsule. Which is generally recognized as safe. It's been commonly used in foods and cosmetics and supplements and drugs, and any white tablet that you find is probably white because of titanium dioxide, or toothpaste, and so it is something that is commonly used. It's very low levels. It's just a tiny amount to make the vegetable capsule white. But with that said, in the EU, there's been some research looking at titanium dioxide, and there's been no conclusive findings, but because it's inconclusive, they have concerns about potentially long-term safety with titanium dioxide. The FDA disagrees. They still think of it as generally recognized as safe, and at our levels, again, it's virtually negligible. But that is the reason that we have it in there. But going forward in the future, we may transition back to clear capsules and just rely on the education to people that, hey, it's a clear capsule. Yeah, it looks salt and pepper mixture of the powder, but that's how it's supposed to be. So, but anyways, that's the reason for the ingredients in there. I just wanted to share that, because I think without that context, people could look at it and wonder, like, what are these other ingredients in there? And so I think that's helpful to understand.
Yeah, I know my listeners and viewers are probably super appreciative of the transparency. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we look at ingredients lists. Yeah,
you want a clean label, right?
Yeah.
And so you want to understand why they're there, and so I think it's important to have that information out there.
That's super cool. Well, again, I'm a fan. I take it every day. So thanks for putting it out there. For listeners, viewers that want to learn more, grab some AX3 astaxanthin, as as I think they'll probably feel compelled to after this conversation. Where can they go to learn more? And do you have any kind of code, any kind of any kind of offer for my audience?
Sure. Yeah. So AX3.life is our website. So not .com, but .life. Also on social, on Instagram, it's the same thing, AX3.life. And yeah, we can do a code for 20% off their first order.
Amazing.
And we can use code MAX for that.
Code MAX?
That's it.
20% off your first order?
Yeah.
Wow. So easy. I love that. So again, it's AX3.life. Mm-hmm. Love it. The branding is amazing too.
Yeah, our team is amazing. They've done a beautiful package here, and it really gives that kind of natural, active element. And we just want to convey that this is something that allows you to live longer and be active and be healthy and have that quality of life, prolonged, which is what we're all shooting for.
So cool. Well, I really appreciate the deep dive into the science, and again, you guys aren't just making this stuff, although you are, and it's a great product. You're pushing the science forward, which I very much appreciate. And you've been doing this since high school, you said?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, 25 years. So it's been a long
Wow.
time, and all aspects of pharmaceutical research and nutraceutical and everything. And so it's, just on a mission to bring astaxanthin to the world.
Wow. I mean, it's literally in your blood, but it's also figuratively very much in your blood.
That's right. That's right.
So cool. Well, thanks, David, for coming in. And again, you guys can go to ax3.life to learn more and to get you some. And the last question that gets asked to everybody on the show: what does living a genius life mean to you?
Well, I think it's doing more of what we did here, having conversations like this, nuance and context. And I feel like, especially in our current world, there's just so much quick reaction to things and kind of polarizing, taking of sides. And I think it's just important to be thoughtful and to think for yourself and to, give everyone the benefit of the doubt and just, think of everyone as another human and have these important conversations, and that's something that I think our world would be a much better place if more people did that on all different types of issues, from what you do for health and for longevity and relationships and politics and all these things. It's conversations and context matters. And then separately, I think being proactive and thoughtful for your long-term approach to everything. So whether it's taking astaxanthin every day or eating a healthy diet or exercising, all these things, you think long-term and be proactive, and you can ward off so many things if you just get in front of it. So I think being proactive and having, conversations with context and nuance and thoughtful conversations are really important.
Hear, hear. Cheers to that. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, thanks again for coming out. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.